we are at the Ultimate Hypnotherapist Retreat, and we are talking about uncovering the subconscious patterns that our clients have. Now, this ends up being a massive aha moment for a client because they only see themselves as doing a problem. They don't see that there's a method in the way that they do a problem. So you can imagine that when it's all uncovered at the end, when you break things down into little pieces, then it becomes manageable in terms of undoing the problem, if that makes sense. But first of all, let's take it one step at a time. So I would say to a client, so we all do things in a certain way at the subconscious level, the way that we shop, the way that we shower, the way that we brush our teeth, the way that we do anything in our life, there's a certain way that we do it. And so I want to understand how you, Nessa, I want to understand how you do this problem of nail biting, how you do it. So normally we have a trigger, and this, by the way, is in your Mindset Dominance book, which you've all got. So it's called Subconscious Creations. There's a whole chapter on this. So you don't have to take too many notes, you can just listen. So it's in your chapter, Subconscious Creations, okay? So there's a trigger, there's a thought that follows the trigger, there's a feeling, and then there's an action. Whereas clients just see them as doing the problem of anxiety, or doing the problem of stress, or doing whatever problem. So now we're going to find out how Nessa does the problem of nail biting. Okay, so when you engage in the problem of nail biting, and so when we say how do you do the problem, we're actually differentiating the client from the problem because they are doing the problem. So any action that you do, you almost choose to do, don't you? You're not a problem yourself. So by using that language, they're already starting to understand that the problem is separate to them. So that's why we say, how do you do the problem? Because we do a problem. It's action that we actually take. So by using that language, we're reinforcing that the client is not the problem, they do the problem. So Nessa, what would be the trigger for you to engage in nail biting?
Two things. I think feeling a bit anxious and boredom.
Feeling a bit anxious and boredom. So there we have triggers. Feeling a bit anxious and boredom. Okay. So anxious and boredom. So they're the two triggers that Nessa has to do some nail biting. Okay, so then let's take one. So let's take the anxious one. So you're feeling a bit anxious. What's the thought in your head?
It's almost like there's no thought. It's a bit more of a feeling.
Okay. And what's the feeling?
Slightly wired.
Okay, so like this wide feeling.
Jittery, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were to relax, what do you think the thought would be in your head? What would be the thought in your head? If you think about a time when you're feeling a bit jittery and anxious, and you have that jittery feeling, what would be the thought that you would have?
Calm.
That you're feeling calm at that moment when you're feeling jittery?
Oh, no, I think you meant the opposite of what would the thought be?
When you're feeling that jittery, what's going on around you? Take yourself...
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty about the future?
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of clients that think they don't have thoughts, but they actually do. We always have thoughts, okay? It's just that it's not broken down for them. In their mind, they've gone from this jittery feeling to biting their nails. But when you break it down, and notice I didn't say, no, of course you had a thought. It's just that I asked more questions so that we could get the right response out, okay? So in fact, there is a thought there, and the thought is, I'm feeling a bit uncertain about my future. Yeah, I'm feeling uncertain about the future. And the feeling, she's already jumped to the feeling, is that jittery feeling. Feeling a bit antsy-pantsy, sort of jittery. And then what happens is what? Bite the nail. Okay, so there's one pattern that we've uncovered. Already the client is having an aha moment because they never saw it that way. Remember I said at the beginning, the purpose of the first session is for clients to have a whole stack of aha moments. This is their first aha moment. They never broke it down in that way. How can they? It's subconscious. It doesn't happen consciously. So the trigger is she's feeling a little bit anxious And the thought is, I'm feeling uncertain about the future, feeling jittery at some part of her body, and then she turns towards biting her nails, and that's the problem that Nessa does. Now, we say to the client, so that's how you do the problem. Now we're going to work out how you don't do the problem. The client always thinks they do the problem. No matter what the problem is, whether the problem is overeating or drinking too much or some sort of other bad habit, they think that they're always doing the problem. The fact is they don't always do the problem. They don't always do the problem, and this is news to them, okay? So there are times, Nessa, so this is what I would say, there are times when you do have that thought, I'm feeling uncertain about the future, but you do not bite your nails. Tell me what happens instead. When you have that trigger, I'm feeling anxious or bored, but you don't have, it doesn't go to biting your nails, something else happens. How do you not do the problem? What do you do instead? Instead of biting your nails, what's the thought that comes into your head instead? So you might be thinking, I'm feeling uncertain about the future, but then you have a counter thought, which leads to you not biting your nails. What's the counter thought?
It's more calm.
Yeah, and what's the thought that leads to calm?
That I'll be okay.
I'll be okay. So it's really important and imperative in our work as hypnotherapists that we don't actually find the strategy for the client. The client has all the wisdom inside them. They know all the answers. What we do is facilitate that. So there's no point me saying to Nessa, so you need to say to yourself, I'll be okay. Is that what you said, I'll be okay? They're her words. So that's her empowering thought. So instead she says, I'll be okay. And then how do you feel? You said you feel calm. And then what do you do instead when you're feeling calm? Do you do an activity? Do you get yourself up and go and do something?
Yeah, I might sit down and do some work or go and exercise or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you put a lot of posts on Facebook. Would you do that? Something empowering?
Yeah.
What would be a typical thing you would do?
I'll probably make up me a post.
Yeah. Okay. The reason I say that is because I know that Nessa puts up a lot of empowering posts up on Facebook. So she's obviously feeling good when she does that. Yeah.
Yes.
So post Facebook. So we see here we've got two patterns, and this is what I say to the client. I say, so you see we've got two patterns here, one that works for you and one that doesn't. One that works for you, one that doesn't. What we're going to do during this program is make sure that you tap into the one that works for you more than the one that doesn't. Okay? She's already got a strategy. We don't have to think of one for her. She's got a strategy that works. And I've got other examples in that chapter, subconscious creations, of how that works. All the examples in mindset dominance are all real and true. I've not made any of them up. It would be too hard to make things up. So you can see that the way that I do it on the sheet in my room, the consulting room, is basically I write this out in terms of like, this box leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. So if I ever look at my notes, I don't have to read my notes. I can clearly see the pattern that they do, that works for them, and the pattern that doesn't work for them. So what we're going to try and do as therapists is reinforce the pattern that works for them. But already, because she has awareness of that, what she's automatically going to do without me even telling her is that when she has the thought, I'm feeling uncertain about the future, she will have a counter thought that says, yes, I'll be okay. And then she will relax, and then she'll go and put up a nice empowering post on Facebook, which reinforces that feeling for her and makes her feel powerful instead of biting her teeth.
My nails.
See, sometimes I can't speak. Instead of biting her nail. Okay, so that is the how you ask that question. So you can see that by preparing that, that's the way that you would ask it. You wouldn't just say, so how do you do the problem? And that's why I said to you guys during the half-day workshops, I can give you the book with all the questions, but the real value is what you say before so that you can get the best result from the client.
You know what's blown me away was that thought, I'm feeling uncertain about my future. Because I've been thinking about do this, and it never came to my mind.
Yeah.
And that actually is like,
Aha moment.
yeah, totally.
So we have aha moments with our clients from the first paid session. And so we have so many, this is just the beginning, we're on question number 2. So we have so many aha moments in that first session, you can imagine there is absolutely no point doing hypnosis as well. They're already being blown away, like Nessa said, she's been blown away. So we don't need to do other work that will just take them into a level and a place which will just exhaust them emotionally. They're already going to be exhausted after the first session, okay, with a lot of aha moments. Thank you heaps. So let me...